Now, last weekend was the start of the long road to the final of the African Champions League, and amongst those taking their first steps, Tanzanian club Simba. You'll remember they made it to the quarterfinals last season, a huge step for a club which has been transformed in the past 18 months on and off the field. And the man behind that change is Tanzanian billionaire Mo Dewji, a boyhood fan who now owns 49% of the club. He's trying to turn them into continental contenders. And he told me he first realised the scale of that task at an African Champions League game against Zamalek in Cairo way back in 2003.
When we were playing the game, I happened to sit with one of the leaders, and I asked him about the budgets and the recruitment process and the scouting and the infrastructure. In short, I realized that our budget was 1.5% of the budget of Zamalek.
He wanted to change the club, but at the time, he says, the club itself wasn't receptive, so he went off to continue his business interests and spend some time in politics. But then an off-the-cuff remark in a television interview had the end result of bringing him back on board at a time when the club was in the doldrums once again.
And we were doing terrible. We hadn't won even the local league for 5 years. Only 500 people were coming to watch the game. People had lost interest. So that decade, you saw many Tanzanians, move towards English Premier League clubs, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal. Nobody cared about Simba.
But it's a story that resonates across the continent and beyond. And to grab back the attention of local fans, you have to take action.
Last year itself, I must have put in a couple of million euros. We bought good international players. We started creating a system of scouting. We got a fantastic coach. Our budget just from last year to this year it's like 2.5 times more.
And the new investment worked in the short term. With a new coach and reasonably well-paid players on board, Simba made it to the quarterfinals of the African Champions League. But it's not enough to splash the cash. You need to draw the fans in as well.
Social media, like it's big in Europe and in England. In Tanzania, it's also very, very big. And I think I've got 15, 20 million people on social media. So suddenly when I come in, I see, you have Simba pages, 50 Simba Instagram pages, So what I did was I got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, first verified. And so now all information that comes out is through our official social media pages. And if you see in the last only 6 months, I think we jumped from like 200,000 followers to now almost 800,000 followers.
Social media, they make a speciality of goading local rivals like Yanga, and real-world events also. The club recently held its so-called Simba Week with a host of happenings, some entirely unrelated to football, but all with the club's branding. It culminated in a 60,000 sellout match, and Mo Dewji says the combination of money, on-field success, and a bit of self-promotion, plus the changes off the field that allowed all that to happen, have made a massive difference.
10 years ago, you would see, in a small bar, you would have 250, 300 people watching the English Premier League. And suddenly we had pictures where you had like 15 people vis-a-vis 400, 500 following Simba.
Big change. Mo Dewji of Simba Sports Club in Tanzania. And he's been telling me also that he thinks that the model that Simba have created can have an impact not just in Tanzania, but beyond in the rest of sub-Saharan Africa and around the world. We'll hear more from him in an hour's time. And we've been hearing this morning from the man who runs Tanzania's Simba, one of the biggest football clubs in East Africa, but one which was in the doldrums with low gates and fans more interested in European football than the domestic or continental game. Tanzanian billionaire Mo Dewji, after a long and convoluted journey, which you may have heard him describe an hour ago, now owns 49% of the club, and with money in the bank, a changed ownership structure, more success on the pitch and real engagement with the fans, he says he is winning them back. What's more, he says the improvement in Simba's fortunes can directly help other teams in Tanzania, like their great rivals Yanga, for instance, and indeed others around the continent.
Basically, by improving Simba, we're improving Yanga. And by improving Yanga, we're improving the league of Tanzania. And if you see also in the CHAN, And we first, after 39 years, we qualified in Africa Cup of Nations. This is all was partly instigated by Simba Sports Club. And I believe Simba Sports Club is not only building the rivals, and it's also giving confidence in clubs that are in the region. When you have good local teams, then you will have fantastic national team, and that is where your players will be able to come to Europe, etc., etc.
Sure. If you look at what you've done in Simba and in Tanzania, and then you look around the rest of or large parts of sub-Saharan Africa in particular, you've built your model in part based on what you saw in North Africa with Zamalek. Do you think that clubs in Nigeria or Kenya or DR Congo or large parts of the continent should look at what you have done?
We've already been approached, from clubs from Malawi, from Zambia, from Kenya, like Gor Mahia, which is another very big club. And they want to come and study our structure, how we've done it, how our system works. So they all now want to emulate. And I hope, it kind of changes the whole system of running football in this region.
That's Mo Dewji of Simba in Tanzania. You can hear more from him in an hour's time. It's a really interesting project, trying to change the way the club is run, trying to change the way the club engages with fans and tempt people back to domestic football, away from the English Premier League, La Liga and all that kind of thing. He says it's working. They got to the quarterfinals of the African Champions League last season. We'll see how they do this campaign.